Did anybody here take one of the baby bottles?
Yeah.
I know about you. We'll go to, well, they're due back on the 29th, not this Sunday. Okay, but the following Sunday.
All right, so we're in Deuteronomy chapter 30, same place where we've been for the past several weeks. We may not finish Deuteronomy this semester. That's kind of amazing, isn't it? So right now, Deuteronomy chapter 30, God promised, if you recall, God promised that His people will return back to the land of their fathers, which is the promised land, which is present-day Israel, and will occupy and will bring all the people back from all four corners of the world that they've been scattered. Of course, this is Moses is saying this even before they're entering into the promised land. And he's saying this will for sure happen, they will return. And right now, we're going through history where we're seeing God fulfilling His promises, fulfilling the promises. And so we talked about 1948. What major event happened in 1948? Israel became a nation again. Israel became a nation again. What happened right after they declared themselves a nation? War. 5 Arab nations attacked immediately, 1 minute after midnight on May 15, 1948, to wipe the name of Israel off the map. The War of Independence lasted for 10 months, and guess who was still around? Israel. Guess what? They actually conquered more land, got more land than they were given in the British mandate. So that's where we talked about there. We talked about the Ezekiel vision, where the dry bones come together, and now we see the muscles starting to flex. Remember, they started out with nothing. No military equipment, no army, no air force, no nothing. And by the end of the war, they had 117,000 person army military that they disbanded to build a nation. Now they have to build a nation. Remember, now the immigrants are coming back. Jewish immigrants are coming to the promised land, coming back to Israel after a 2,000-year exile. So just a very, very fascinating year. Now, part of the War of Independence is Jerusalem. The UN partition plan. Does anybody know what the UN partition plan stated specifically about Jerusalem? Partition plan partitioned the Palestine area into a Jewish state and a Palestinian state. But the city of Jerusalem would be controlled as an international city. In other words, it would be controlled by any one particular state, I suppose, a UN-run city, secure city. So the British leave, 1948, May 14th, midnight 1948, British mandate's over with. They go to war. Now we have Jerusalem. If Jerusalem is supposed to be controlled by the UN, well, they need to secure it. That never happened. And so we have the battle for Jerusalem. So we're going to go right to a video on this first battle of Jerusalem in 1948.
When the British withdrew from Palestine on May 14, 1948, 1,000 soldiers from Jordan's Arab Legion invaded the Jewish quarter of Jerusalem. For 13 days, the quarter was defended by just 200 Israeli fighters. But by May 27th, food and ammunition had run out, and reinforcements still had not arrived. The few Jewish defenders left standing had been ordered to retreat. The Jordanians captured and blew up the city's main synagogue, a dramatic end to the battles of the old city. On the morning of May the 28th, the leaders of the Jewish quarter officially surrendered. Colonel Abdullah el-Tel, the local commander of the Arab Legion, gave orders for the Jewish defenders to be arrested. The 35 remaining fighters lined up, but el-Tel refused to believe that so few men had caused him so many losses. "You have deceived me," he said. "If I had known your true size, I would have fought you with sticks." He then ordered that some of the quarter's Jewish residents also be arrested to create a more impressive parade of prisoners when he returned to Amman. In the end, 350 Jewish men were taken as prisoners of war, 68 people were killed, and 1,400 Jews were expelled from their homes. In a Jewish cemetery on the Mount of Olives, thousands of graves were destroyed. Headstones were used as building blocks for the Jordanian army barracks, and officers built latrines on top of the stones to defile them. 58 synagogues were demolished. Hundreds of Torah scrolls were burned. And for the first time in 1,300 years, Jews were denied access to their remaining holy places, including the Western Wall. After the battle, Colonel el-Tel reported to his superiors that the Jews had been defeated.
Only 4 days after our entry into Jerusalem, the Jewish quarter had become their graveyard. Death and destruction reigned over it. As the dawn of Friday, May 28, 1948, was about to break, the Jewish quarter emerged engulfed in a black cloud of death and agony. For the first time in 1,000 years, not a single Jew remains in the Jewish quarter. Not a single building remains intact. This makes the Jews' return here impossible.
All right, so for 19 years, the Jews were not allowed to go to the Western Wall. We're not allowed into the old city of Jerusalem. It's controlled by the Jordanians underneath the Arab League. And here they're making mention the Jews will never return again. 19 years goes by. We'll fast forward to 1967. The Six-Day War occurs. The Six-Day War, the Jews, Israel knew they were going to be attacked, and there was a surprise attack on Egypt. Took out the Egyptian Air Force in 4 hours. We'll probably cover a little bit more of that later on. But Jerusalem became an opportunity. Israel told Jordan that if you don't attack us, you can have Jerusalem, you can have everything, we won't do anything to you. Jordan attacks, Israel then counterattacks, and Israel wins, and in 1967, Jerusalem was reunited. And for the first time in 19 years, Jews were able to go pray at the Western Wall. So here in 1948, the old city was lost to Jordan. Now we had East Jerusalem and West Jerusalem, where Israel still controlled Western Jerusalem, but Eastern Jerusalem portion was underneath where the old city was, and that was under Jordanian control. So very fascinating here in the story of Jerusalem, where they lost that part. Here they gain a nation and lose the most holiest possession, Jerusalem. So that was in 1948. So we have in our progression of Israel, we have here where Israel gained more land, survives the invasions of war, and gains some more territory. All right, now we need to talk about what's happening outside of the boundaries of Israel, which is also a truly fascinating story as well. Now, if you recall, Jews were living in all the Middle Eastern countries: Iraq, Libya, Morocco, Egypt, all over, right? They've been scattered. And they've established communities for centuries and centuries they've been living in these Middle Eastern countries. 1948 occurs. Israel's given a nation. They have a nation. These Arab nations with Jewish residents living in them, what do you think they do to them? Huh? Drive them out. Expel them from a country they've been living in peacefully for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. Drive them out. And so here's another instance where during the Holocaust, Jews in Europe were driven out. Right? Here now, God's going to drive out those in the nations surrounding Israel. So God is bringing Jews home. And in these particular cases, it's done by force. No other option. Their property, their rights, everything is stripped from them. And they're coming into Israel with nothing. Now, at the time of 1948, Israel had nothing and couldn't even take them. It was very difficult for them to take them in, but they did and succeeded. And so here we have the interesting story of Jewish refugees, and then you have Palestinian refugees. Palestinians living in a land now that's controlled by Israel, right? And they are actually told by their neighboring countries to leave, and then when we win, you can return back. However, something didn't go according to plan. Israel is still in existence, and there's still refugees, Palestinian refugees.
So I'm sorry, I've always been lost about the nation. When they became a nation, so where were they when they became a nation?
So when Israel became a nation, they declared that anybody living within the land have full rights as anybody else. Arab, Jew, whoever was living in the land of Palestine, the land that they now controlled. They had full rights, treated equally.
But they were
right?
pushed out.
They were not pushed out. The Palestinians were not pushed out. They were told by the Arab nations to leave, and then when they win the war against Israel, then they can return. So they were being used as a propaganda. Okay? And right now there's refugee camps still in existence. And this will tell a little bit more of the story.
In addition to the topics discussed in our first two videos, the subject of refugees is one of the core issues for understanding the Israel-Palestinian conflict. Who are the refugees? Why, more than 60 years later, is this still an issue? Let's look at the facts. So, how did it all begin? In May 1948, the local Arab population was joined by 7 Arab countries in a collective attempt to destroy the newly re-established Jewish state. Encouraged by Arab leaders who promised they would return as victors, and later on, as a result of their failed war efforts, an estimated 500,000 Arabs fled to neighboring Arab territories. But is this the full picture? I'd like you to take a look at the refugees in these photos. Many people assume they are Arab refugees fleeing Israel, but in fact, they are innocent Jewish refugees forced out of Arab countries. This map tells the full story. There were far more Jewish refugees than Arab refugees. Over 850,000 Jews from ancient Jewish communities predating Islam and the Arab occupation of the Middle East were forced out of their homes. Jews were stripped of their citizenship in many countries, and their property was confiscated. In contrast, 160,000 Arabs accepted Israel's offer to remain, and today there are more than 1 million Israeli Arab citizens with full equal rights living in Israel. Now, here is a question. Have you heard of any Jewish refugee camps? I didn't think so. The Jewish refugees were immediately welcomed and absorbed by Israel or by other nations. Then why, after more than 60 years, are the Arab Palestinian refugees still not welcomed and absorbed among their own brethren? And how could their numbers have grown from 500,000 to 4.7 million? The sad reality is that the Arab refugees never had a chance. Attempts at resettlement were blocked by a variety of discriminatory laws, enacted in Arab countries, such as a ban on receiving citizenship, with the exception of Jordan, blocking them from entering many professions, restrictions on owning land, restrictions on movement, and a denial of education and health services. Sir Alexander Galloway, a former director of the UN Refugee Agency in Jordan, gave the reason for this discrimination. Quote, "The Arab nations do not want to solve the Arab refugee problem. They want to keep it as an open sword, as a weapon against Israel." Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser explained the effect of this weapon aimed at overwhelming Israel demographically, with generations of refugees cultivated to hate. Quote, "If the refugees return to Israel, Israel will cease to exist." And what role did the United Nations play? Sadly, they were less than helpful. While all refugees in the world are assisted by the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR, a separate agency, UNRWA, was established specifically for the Palestinians. Why can't the Palestinian refugees share an agency with the refugees of Bosnia, Congo, or Darfur, to name a few? The answer is because while the United Nations Central Refugee Agency helps refugees resettle, the United Nations Palestinian Refugee Agency helps perpetuate their status by applying unique criteria. For example, refugees lose their status after receiving citizenship from a recognized country. Palestinian refugees do not. Refugees cannot transmit their status from generation to generation. Palestinian refugees can. Refugees are encouraged to resettle in other countries or integrate in their host countries. UNRWA avoids such policies. The United Nations spends on a single Palestinian refugee almost 3 times more than on a non-Palestinian refugee, and employs over 30 times the staff. The bottom line is, throughout the 20th century, the UN found durable solutions for tens of millions of refugees, while the Palestinian Refugee Agency has found, well, none. Some people may suggest this is hypocrisy. Let me share something personal. My father's family was forced out of Algeria. They and another 600,000 Jews from Arab states resettled in Israel. History has proven that resettlement and integration helped tens of millions of refugees during the 20th century reclaim their lives. However, the Palestinian refugees are trapped between Arab leaders unwilling to accept their brothers and UN agencies who do not apply equal and universal principles to all refugees. Is this just?
So that's a little bit about the difference between the Arab refugees and the Jewish refugees, and kind of maybe help explain what's going on today. Because the Arab refugees are still in camps all around Israel.
Those people don't have no country.
Don't have no country, right? So if you don't have a country, you can't travel because you can't get a passport because you don't have a country. It's very difficult for these individuals. And so within their camp, within, well, not really cities, but controlled cities that are leased from their host countries like Jordan, I guess Syria and so forth, they're of course taught to hate. Taught to hate. So this is what's going on.
There's like people gunning down.
Yeah. Hamas is infiltrated into Palestine and so forth. All right, here's some testimonies on the Jewish side.
I didn't want to think about all what happened, so I just buried my past. There were 38,000 Jews living in the northern part of Libya at the time. Today, there are none left, not that had. The community is totally extinct.
If somebody wants to understand what is going on in the Middle East, they have to understand the Jewish refugees from Arab countries.
Buried beneath the headlines of the Mideast conflict is the forgotten story of the region's indigenous Jewish communities. In 1945, up to 1 million Jews lived in the Middle East outside of the Palestine Mandate. Within a few years, only a few thousand remained. The ancient Jewish quarters of Cairo, Damascus, and Baghdad were once vibrant, bustling centers. Today, they are silent. In the year 586 BCE, Babylonian armies destroyed Solomon's temple in Jerusalem and exiled the Jews of Judea to Babylon, modern-day Iraq.
My family is among the Jews who stayed on that land for the next 2,600 years until around 1950. Jews who stayed in the region are known as Mizrahim, which in Hebrew means Easterners. They either stayed on that land of Babylon, as my family did, or they migrated to lands throughout the region, whether it was Iran, whether it was Syria, Lebanon, Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, and so on, the entire region.
In many of these countries, for example, North Africa, Egypt, Babylonia, Jews preceded the Arabs by many centuries and sometimes by millennia.
In the year 622, a new religion emerged out of the Arabian Peninsula. Within a few years, Arab Muslim armies had conquered most of the Middle East. Mizrahi Jews found themselves referred to by an Arabic word, Dini.
Adini, or Dhamma, depending on the pronunciation, is a tolerated people. It's people of the book, Christians and Jews, people who worship, practice the Bible. And according to Islam, this is a group that's supposed to be protected. What that means is, as Islam conquered the entire Middle East, North African region and killed people in the name of Islam if they would not convert, the Jews and Christians would be spared their lives. However, they always had to be both physically and metaphorically inferior. For example, a Jew could not ride a horse because then his head would be higher than that of a Muslim. Jews could not build a synagogue higher than a mosque.
Under European colonial powers, Dhimmi laws were largely abolished and many Jews flourished. But in the 1930s, a tide of Arab nationalism swept the countries of the Middle East as they emerged from colonial rule. Strident Arab nationalist leaders often made Jews a scapegoat for social discontent.
There was a pattern of Arab government, state-sanctioned, indeed state-orchestrated repression, which included intimidation, harassment, beatings, persecution, and even murder.
In 1940, Haj Amin al-Husseini was the most prominent leader of the Palestinian Arabs and the head of the Arab Higher Committee, the central political organization of the Arabs of Palestine. He and Hitler discussed plans to establish concentration camps in the Middle East. He delivered a radio address to the Arab world on Nazi radio saying, "Arabs, rise as one man and fight for your sacred rights. Kill the Jews wherever you find them." His words reverberated across the Middle East.
ראיתי את הזוועה הזאת, ועד היום מול העיניים שלי. הערבים קמו והורגים, שורפים והורגים. התחילו לפרוץ בתים, להרוג, לשמוע, להושיב. ואנחנו פחדנו.
massacred her. She much money. They were good. I said, she got back having a heart. So that's okay.
When Israel was created, what it did was it unshackled the Jew from being under the rule and the control of Arabs and Islam. They became free and independent.
About 50% of the Jewish population today in Israel is made up of Mizrahi Jews, Jews like myself, who came from the Arab countries. We are the face of Israel.
There are no Jews left in Libya today. The Darvishi synagogue in Tripoli once overflowed with congregants on the Sabbath and on holidays. Today, it is abandoned and vandalized. Only a few dozen Jews remain in Iraq, Egypt, Yemen, Syria, and Lebanon. Outside Beirut, the Hamdoun synagogue sits empty. In Morocco, the El Husseini synagogue in the old Jewish quarter of Fez is now a boxing club. After Jews fled Iraqi Kurdistan in 1955, this synagogue was turned into a mosque. The dirt road was built over this old Jewish cemetery, with foot traffic exposing Jewish graves. Vibrant Middle Eastern communities that once numbered in the hundreds of thousands are no more. All told, nearly 1 million Jews have fled Arab countries and Iran, and hundreds of Jewish communities have been ethnically cleansed.
Behind every intimidation, behind every silencing, behind every persecution, behind every beating or murder of Jews from Arab lands, behind every property sequestered, behind every assets seized, and behind every bank account blocked, we're talking about the historiography of an entire community.
If I say, who are the Middle East refugees, people don't think at all about the Jews. All the people think about are the Palestinians.
Many people ask me, why do you call yourself forgotten refugees? It is interesting to know that in the history of the Middle East, we have been totally cut out of the picture.
The United Nations General Assembly since 1947 has adopted 687 resolutions on the Arab-Israeli conflict. 101 of those resolutions dealt with refugees, but all those 101 resolutions dealt with Palestinian refugees only. It's astonishing to realize that not one resolution, not one of these resolutions ever dealt with the issue of Jewish refugees from Arab lands.
So I think you see God is moving his people home, right? By, well, these are very tragic means, no less, but vibrant Jewish populations in Egypt and Iraq, and here we have less than 40, less than 70, less than 50 today. So entire communities just moved and replaced in the nation of Israel. Or some of them immigrated over the United States and so forth. But anyway, God is moving them in a major way back home. He's doing what he said he's going to do. And sometimes he moves us out of fear, or sometimes he moves us because it's enticing. right? And so he's using both means to get people to move. Now, these people have been in communities that they've been in for hundreds of years. This is home. They're established, they got neighbors, they got schools, they got everything they need. And here, overnight, they leave. They need to leave. They're forced to leave. They're expelled.
I've noticed that just the hatred that these Arab countries have. It's like an evil, a very evil hatred that they have for the Jews. And it's just, you know, I don't even experience that type of hatred here in the United States.
No.
It's just a hatred,
Yeah.
a very evil hatred.
No, we know where the source of that is.
Well, because what they didn't want to agree on is when you read the Bible and you're saying that the promise is made with
Abraham.
Abraham, they claim that Ishmael is that promised son because it's the first child.
Yeah.
But not, agreeing with the story behind, Isaac, that they don't want to agree that if God promised, all those promises is for Ishmael, and not as, the land and everything.
Yep. God made specific promises to Abraham and to Isaac and Jacob. He also made promises to Ishmael's children as well. And Israel can't take land that God did not give them. God has given land to the children of Ishmael. And so they can't take that. And we see here, God is not going to allow foreign nations to take Israel. God has rebuilt Israel. God has put Israel back in as a nation. So this graphic over here is the existing Palestinian refugee camps scattered over the Middle East. So during 1948 to 1951, Jewish exodus from Arab and Muslim land resulted in 1 million Jews fleeing or being expelled from Arab and Muslim nations. Most settle in Israel. Estimated 400,000 and 750,000 Arab Palestinians flee the Palestinian area. There's some interesting stories with refugees in Shanghai, Jews in Shanghai. By the time World War II broke out, Shanghai was home to 20,000 Jews. And you know where Shanghai is, right? China. When we talk about God scattered his people, he scattered his people, right? One of the reasons why there was a gathering in Shanghai is before World War II broke out, Jews in Germany and Poland realized Hitler's up to no good and we got to get out of here. And so they made their way through the Soviet Union down into China and ended up into Shanghai, which seemed to be friendly to Jews at this time before World War II really broke out. Some actually made their way all the way to Japan. And then when we have the Japanese joining forces with Germany, Hitler advised Japan, this is what you need to do to the Jews. Set up a concentration camps, set up ghettos and stuff. So a ghetto was created in Shanghai where the Jews were all confiscated and put into this ghetto. There was further plans for them, but they were never acted out, fortunately. But here they are in Shanghai, 20,000 of them, from Russia, Poland, Austria, Germany, Japan, and Iraq, leading to the rise of the Nazi and Bolshevik revolutions in Russia. In 1941, Germany influenced Japan to place all the Jews in the ghetto, prepare for the extermination of the Jews. But Shanghai was liberated in 1945, and then China went into civil war, resulting in the communist regime taking over in 1949. So that wasn't friendly for the Jews, right? So quickly, that resulted in the Shanghai Jews leaving quickly, and 1,000 of them immigrated. Shanghai quickly went from 20,000 Jews to 1,000 Jews, when many immigrated to Israel and the United States. So here you have Jews in Shanghai, that as soon as 1949, the communist results, they were going to push them, they moved, and Israel's open, we're going to go to Israel, back to Israel. So God's calling them home. We have Operation Magic Carpet, 1949 to 1950. also known as Operation of Wings of Eagles. This occurred between June 1949 and September 1950, bringing 49,000 Yemenite Jews to Israel. Anybody know where Yemen is? Yes, south of Saudi Arabia. The tip of Saudi Arabia Peninsula. And Yemen is not friendly to Jews, and if you're watching the news, Yemen is terrorist camps that we are fighting even today. And so this amazing event brought British American transport planes that made some 380 flights from Aden in a secret operation that did not become public for several months later. So in May 1949, the Imam of Yemen agreed to let 45,000 of the 46,000 Jews in his country leave. Israeli transport planes flew them home in Operation Magic Carpet. The Yemenite Jews, mostly children, were brought to Israel on some 380 flights. This was the most wonderful and complex immigration operations the state have ever known. British American planes airlifted the Jews from Aden, the capital of Yemen. When they reached a city from all over Yemen, after extremely dangerous and risky journeys, the operation was secret and were released to the media only after several months after its completion. The Yemenite Jews were, if you could say, very backward. They were backcountry people, and so they had never seen a plane. And here they come into Aden, and here's a plane, take them off. Apparently they were scared at all because they knew Scripture. Exodus chapter 19, verse 4, you have seen what I did unto the Egyptians, how I buried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Isaiah 40, verse 31, but they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. You realize we're going to be taken up on wings of eagles. And here they get aboard the planes. I think I have a video. Yeah.
You know the name of the man in my church? I think in the Israelite Glory they had an article there.
The place where the miracle occurred, the days the planes came. This is the far end of the Near East. This is Aden, a British protector, 1,600 miles south of the airport. These men running across the sands to greet the plane of refugees. In 1947 and 48, 5,000 Jews escaping terror and slavery in the backward Arab state of Yemen fled to Aden. They risked their way across barren mountains, forbidden borders and desert sands. Most came on foot. Lucky were the old ones with a donkey to ride. They left without possessions and they arrived in rags. They came because they had heard in Aden Jews could find help. This is the moment of verse. Imagine as if you were one who had fled, conceived as one for whom the world of machines ends with a spinning wheel 50 centuries old. Now out of the sky comes a thing such as you have never seen in your life. The great machine that flies. Yet you know in a way what it is. For the words of the Lord are there to read in the Holy Writ. Tell the children of Israel how I bear you on eagle's wings and brought you unto myself. Now you step up, and with each step you pass from the dark ages to the present century, from bondage to freedom. Hours later, across the whole subcontinent of Arabia, beyond the hills of Judea, you descend in modern Israel. Here, you and your children and your children's children will live as free men.
So there's Yemenite Jews. coming home. Amazing operation. There's the graphic of European Jews coming home to Israel as well. The year 1949 saw massive waves of immigration to Israel. Some 250,000 Jews who arrived that year alone were placed in military barracks and tent camps. Remember, Israel's not ready for them, and yet they're coming, right? They just survived a war, right? They're just trying to build a nation. And they were later moved to training camps. The state nearly collapsed under the burden. The state of Israel nearly collapsed under the burden. Calculations made that year showed that the state needed some 3,000 for the absorption of each immigrant, which meant that the state required about 700,000 for the whole campaign. The entire state budget was less than that. Yet despite everything, the young state was more than willing to do all that was necessary to absorb the immigrants, believing that this was the reason for its establishment in the first place. The Jews are coming home and will do whatever it takes for them to get there. Right? 1950, we see the law of return. The law of return. Oops. No one there. Law of return. Anybody know what that means? The law of return is Israeli legislation passed on July 5th, 1950, which gives Jews the right to live in Israel and to gain Israeli citizenship. In 1970, the right of entry and settlement was extended to people with one Jewish grandparent and non-Jewish people who were married to Jews, although they were not considered Jewish under Jewish law. This is the law that they set up, that if you have a Jewish descent, apparently through a grandparent, one Jewish grandparent, you had automatically citizenship in Israel. Right now. Well, this was a law that was set in 1950. You got to remember, 1948 declaration, they go to war, they have a de facto government. 1949, they have official elections. Their government is still getting put in place. So here's one of the first major legislation that they did was the law of return. If you have Jewish descendants through a grandparent, you will automatically have citizenship. Jeremiah 23:3, and I will gather the remnant of my flock out of all countries, whither I have driven them, and will bring them again to their folds, and I shall be fruitful, and they shall be fruitful and increase. And I will set up shepherds over them, which shall feed them, and they shall fear no more, nor be dismayed, neither shall they be lacking, saith the Lord. Jeremiah 32:37, behold, I will gather them out of all countries, whither I have driven them in mine anger and in my fury and great wrath, and I will bring them again unto this place, and I will cause them to dwell safely. Well, safely. Remember, for the past 2,000 years, they've been moved from one country to the next, to the next, to the next, chased and cursed and everything imaginable, as we've seen here today. And here they have a home, a permanent home, permanent land. Also, dealing with the land, in 1950, we find Israel declared Jerusalem as their capital. To us, that doesn't seem to make, why are we talking about that? Jerusalem is their capital. Well, here they declared Jerusalem as their capital. Remember, at this moment in time, we have West Jerusalem and East Jerusalem. I don't know, back in the 1950s, apparently they were like North and South Korea, East and West Germany, East and West Berlin. We like to divide the cities, didn't we? But here we had East and West Jerusalem. They had the Jews, Israel controlled West Jerusalem, Jordan controlled East Jerusalem. So here Israel declares Jerusalem as their capital. And Ezekiel 5:5, thus saith the Lord, this is Jerusalem, I have set it in the midst of the nation and countries that are round about her. Zechariah 12:2, behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about, that when they shall be in siege both against Judah, against Jerusalem, and in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All the burden themselves it shall be to cut it in pieces, though all the people of the earth be gathered together against it. And we know in the end times, Armageddon is actually going to be 3 battles, one at Armageddon, one at Jerusalem, and one at Petra. And that's where the Lord is going to return, at the Mount of Olives, coming in right at Jerusalem. And the world's going to go against Jerusalem, as well we see foreshadowing of that today. The 1950 proclamation declared, whereas with the establishment of the state of Israel, Jerusalem once more becomes the capital. whereas practical difficulties which caused the Knesset, which is what they call their parliament, and government institutions to be temporarily housed elsewhere have now for the most part been removed, and the government is carrying out the transfer of its institutions to Jerusalem. The Knesset expresses the wish that construction of the seat of the government and Knesset in Jerusalem proceed speedily on the site allotted by the government for this purpose. Between 1948 and 1967, Jerusalem was divided to East and West Jerusalem. The frontier between Jordanian-controlled East Jerusalem was there was a barbed wire, there was a no man's land through Jerusalem divided up. So here we have Jerusalem. All right, well, between in the 50s and 60s, Arab nations did not stop attacking. They could continue to send in like terrorists, that sort of thing, lob artillery shells, try to disrupt Israeli government, Israeli citizens, doing whatever it could. Arab guerrillas infiltrated Israel from Syria, Egypt, and Jordan to carry out attacks against Israeli citizens and soldiers. And so Israel didn't succumb to this bullying. Israel retaliated with the aim of getting a higher cost of blood from the enemy side in order to deter enemy countries from committing future attacks. So even though the war had ended, they're still attacking, right? Iraq, let's talk a little bit about Iraq. In 1951, we have Operation Ali Baba. This allowed 120,000 Iraqi Jews to be flown out between March and December of 1951, and the largest air immigration ever undertaken at that moment. Operation Ali Baba, also known as Operation Ezra and Nehemiah, and over time we're going to talk about many operations where Israel is going to work at bringing Jews home. That's going to take, that's their mission, to bring Jews back to Israel. And so here we have Iraq. This era lifted 120,000 Jews from Iraq to Israel shortly after the founding of the Jewish state. The operation is named after Jewish biblical figures Ezra and Nehemiah, who led Jewish people out of Babylonian exile and back to Israel in the 5th century in order to rebuild the temple. The operation spanned more than a year. The Iraqi Jewish community was one of the oldest communities in the world, and its members had served as philosophers, educators, doctors, and even high-ranking government officials. However, in the wake of World War II and developing conflict between the Palestinians and Israel, conditions in the Jewish community worsened as public violence against Jews increased and government restrictions were levied. Why were there Jews in Iraq? Nobody? Remember Nebuchadnezzar?
Mm-hmm.
The Babylonian Empire, that's Iraq. So Nebuchadnezzar came in, exiled the Jews from Israel, from Judah, and took quite a few of them back to Babylon. Who's some major biblical characters that we know lived in Babylon?
The three friends.
The three friends? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego?
Daniel.
And Daniel, yeah. Queen Esther lived in Persia. Right? Shushan, the palace of Shushan, that's the next empire to come. So very well established community in Iraq, in Babylon. In fact, when the 70 years expired, and Daniel reminded now King Cyrus, who's the Medes and Persians took over, the Bible says that the 7 years and we'll return home. King Cyrus says, go home. This is where we have Nehemiah going back to build the temple, going back to build the walls of Jerusalem, actually, build the walls of Jerusalem. There's a verse where it shows that Daniel was sad. Any particular reason why Daniel would be sad? There's only a few
that
returned to Judah. Only,
a lot of them stayed.
On comparison, relatively only a few. The rest stayed. Why would they stay? They're comfortable, right? Why leave if we're comfortable? Why go back to a place that we got to rebuild again and be attacked from all sides again? And when we're comfortable here. So anyway, there is an established Jewish community in Iraq. So here in 1951, 1947, the Iraqi government made immigration to Israel illegal, and following Israeli independence, it officially declared Zionism as a capital offense. Hundreds of Jews were arrested and sentenced to jail for trying to leave the country. Israel's subsequent passing in 1950 of the law Return, which promised immediate citizenship to any Jew who moved to Israel, led to a decision by the Knesset to help negotiate on behalf of Iraqi Jews. Subsequently, in 1951, the Iraqi government passed a special bill permitting Jewish immigration. According to Iraqi law, though, Jews had to sell their property and liquidate their businesses before they could leave. Additionally, each person was allowed to take no more than $140 out of the country and could only carry 66 pounds of luggage. Jewelry was also forbidden from being taken out of Iraq. So here we have Israel, brand new Israel negotiates, will take, allow Jews from Iraq to immigrate. Iraq has this law saying you're not allowed to immigrate. Iraq decides, okay, we'll try this. Jews, you're allowed to leave if you sell everything and leave it behind, only take $140 and 66 pounds of luggage and leave all your jewelry behind. You can leave. Iraq's thinking, who's going to leave that? They're going to want to keep that, right? Well, the result was overwhelming. Despite these restrictions, some 50,000 Jews signed up in 1 month. And 2 months later, there were 90,000 on the list. This mass movement stunned the Iraqi government, which had not expected the number of immigrants to exceed 8,000, and feared that administrative institutions run by Jews might collapse. They're running the nation, right? They're up in all forms of government and they're, all parts of society. Now they're leaving. They're leaving. At the same time, the Zionist movement issued a manifesto calling on the Jews to sign up for immigration. It started with following, O Zion, flee, daughter of Babylon. Here we have, they were given a choice to come to Israel, live in Israel, or stay in Iraq and keep all your stuff. They walked away from it. So in this particular instance, it was brutality that occurred in Iraq, but here they're given a choice to give up their stuff. The other countries, they had no choice, right?
Right.
Here they're given a choice, and here with the choice, they chose to leave. They chose to leave. So here we have the Jews in Iraq have left Iraq and come to Israel. Our time is up, but we have many more nations to talk about as God is emptying out the Jews, one nation after another nation after another nation, and populating Israel. The flesh is getting on the bones, right? And we're seeing with each subsequent war, their muscles, you can see it, right?
Yeah.
They're getting stronger. Any questions, anything that you're interested in that you want me to look up?
Do you know, on Saturday when we had Friends of Israel, Harold had brought out, he's doing some old history too, and he had brought out about how in a kibbutz, I think it's called Elyon, like that guy's name, that they had underneath it, they had built and where they make the bullets. And you can actually go there and see it today. That was closed in '75 and made into a museum, yeah.
Now, Anna was telling me about this. This has to do with the War of Independence, or right before the war. Right?
Yeah, when they're trying to get
before the British Mandate occurred, but expired, Israel, the Jewish people were not allowed to import any weapons. Couldn't mass an army, couldn't mass weaponry, couldn't do any of that. So in this particular story, as Anna informed me, they were pulling in things illegally, right?
Right.
And it had set up businesses to look like established businesses, but with the purpose of assembling a community.
It was a kibbutz, and they had a laundry room. And when you went into the laundry room, if you moved the washing machine, there was a tunnel that took you down where they were making the bullets and stuff. And then across from it, they had a bakery. And if you went into the bakery and moved one of their ovens, you went down and it was there. And they would use the washing machine because it made so much noise back then that you wouldn't hear the machine pounding the bullets. And they used the bakery because of the smell. it covered up the smell of them shooting the bullets to see if they worked in the range down underneath. And everything was underneath, and people were wondering why these people were so pale when they were supposed to be working out in the fields. So they even had a tanning booth. This tanning booth to get tan. So when they came up after 16 hours shift, people would think that they had been working out in the field. It was amazing. I just couldn't
How
believe it.
about the raids or the inspections?
Oh yeah, yeah. They knew that they would have an inspection, and they would say they would give them coffee. I think it was it coffee?
Beer.
Beer. That's what it was. And because they weren't prepared, the beer was watered way down. And these guys didn't like that, these inspectors, because it tasted so bad. And they told them, well, if you let us know when you're coming, we will have the good stuff ready for you. So that way they knew when they were coming to inspect them, so they could make sure everything was. And then they found out that their wives like lipstick. So in order to get the certain metal in that they used, the casing, they had all this stuff sent in, and they would save some and polish them up real bright, and they would give them to the officers for lipstick for the wives. They had lipstick in them, and they were, had a real shiny. It was so fascinating. I could not believe it. It was amazing.
It's amazing. God's doing amazing. The word of God has come to life, and we get to witness it. Let's close in prayer. Dear Father, we thank you for today, Lord. We just thank you for your word, Lord, and Lord, the history and what we're living through, and just how you're just all the pieces are coming in order for your return, Lord. And Lord, we just praise you. We look forward to your return. Lord, may you bless the hour to come, and bless your people.
Yeah.
They had actually gone there and scored good. It was unbelievable. Whoa.